Jane, friend Jane. Ask me again and I'll tell you the thing. Ah!
For Pete's sake, Jane, stand up straight and pick up your feet. Awkward kid.
Know why your mother's sick, Jane? Because of your father, that's why. And the day she married him, I knew she lived to regret it. I warned her. I said, Anne, when are all alike, just plain dirty. Your father's no exception. He's never supported her, or you, and he never will. And when I think of your poor, sweet mother tied to that dirty man, I just want to cry. And I suppose if it weren't for you, she'd have left him long ago.
There, don't cry, Janie. You make me feel like crying. Everything will be all right. Mother will fix it. Oh, I declare you've been picked on all through school. Well, tomorrow I'll go to the high school and tell Miss Simmons to move you to another room. And this time we'll make sure your classmates are not. There.
I'm Ray Stewart. Jane, the subject of our program tonight, is mentally ill. It's the object of this program to discuss her case. To many people, mental illness is a mysterious and a fearful thing. And those who have mental illness are often shunned and feared. In this day and age, we seldom are hostile to victims of mental disorders. We just like to put them away someplace to get them out of our sight and out of our thoughts. Well, let's see what happened to Jane.
This is Jane Fraser, and as you see, she attempted to commit suicide by slashing her wrist. Dr. Robertson, the intern, has treated the wrist, and that's coming along successfully, but she is very depressed. She was admitted last night.
Has she been this way ever since admission?
Yes, doctor, she has. She's been just about like this.
Jane? Jane? I didn't say you were. Nobody said you were. Jane, would you like us to help you? Be sure that the nurses keep an eye on her all the time, because she's still very acutely upset, obviously so. And I think we probably, as soon as possible, better get some psychological tests, because we want to find out just how deeply this disturbance may go. And meanwhile, can Miss Malloy perhaps contact the family so that we can find out just what sort of a situation she comes from? Let's find out also where she's been working, what kind of an adjustment she's made there. Meanwhile, the intern will keep an eye on this arm of hers, and any medication she needs, let him check with us on that so that we won't give her too much sedation. Meanwhile, get these things worked up. And I think perhaps, too, you might try to see her every day. Even if in the beginning it's just to sort of let her know that you're interested and ready to help her. Can you try that?
All right, doctor.
In Jane's case, because there was a mental health clinic available in her community and her disorder was discovered early, it was not necessary that she be committed to a mental hospital and be legally labeled as insane. In following out the recommendations of the psychiatrist, the clinical psychologist, Dr. Joshua, conducted a series of psychotherapy interviews with Jane.
Jane, we've given you the psychological test now, and I guess this is about the fourth time that I've talked to you, isn't it? Fourth or fifth. How are you feeling today?
Oh, I feel a little better, I guess. I don't know. I feel so sick. I can't eat. And my legs ache. I don't want to be up so much. I think it'd be better if I were back in bed where I'm in the way.
You've been staying in bed most of the time, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that makes you afraid? getting out of bed? Is it just the tiredness, or is it something else?
I don't understand why I'm so sick. I feel sick, and am I crazy?
Remember when the intern examined you the other day, Dr. Robertson? Remember he told you that he didn't find any organic disease?
But
How did you feel about that?
I guess I'm crazy.
You mean because you have these symptoms, you think you're crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jane, these symptoms don't necessarily mean that you're crazy. I told you the other day that I thought that these symptoms were on an emotional basis after talking to the intern. But that isn't the same thing as being crazy. Let me give you an example of what I mean. See the window over there?
Mm-hmm.
Supposing I said to you, turn around, and you did, and you looked in the window and you saw, say, a tiger staring out at you. How would you feel?
Well, I guess I'd be scared.
Of course you would.
Scream.
You'd scream. What else would happen? What would happen inside of your body if that happened just all of a sudden?
My heart would beat fast, and
Right.
I'd get butterflies in my stomach. I know that.
Might you get a stomachache afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
Stomach cramp?
Mm-hmm.
You'd perspire pretty freely, perhaps, wouldn't you? You might.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I would.
And you might feel weak and faint and dizzy.
Mm-hmm.
And Jane, if that happened to you, would you think that you were crazy?
Oh, there's a tiger in the window.
That's right. You'd say that you were just afraid, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Well, that's what we think might be causing these physical symptoms that you have. That is, when we say it's emotional, we mean it's a fear experience that your body reacts to. Now, we know that you actually feel tired. We know that you actually feel dizzy. We know that you can't sleep at times. And we know that you feel sick at your stomach. We don't question the pain, you see.
Mm-hmm.
But we just say that there is no organic cause of it. It's an emotional fear. It's as if you have the tiger inside of your mind, you see, all of the time.
I can't think of anything I'm afraid of except people. But
Has anyone ever called you crazy?
Right.
Tell me a little about that.
I got sick at the office where I was working, and
Mm-hmm.
the company doctor said there wasn't anything wrong with me. And one of the girls said, "Heck, she must be crazy."
Mm-hmm.
I heard her say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought maybe I might be crazy too.
You mean because you didn't have any physical or any organic cause of the way you felt?
The doctor couldn't find any. All I knew is I felt sick.
Uh-huh.
But
And you thought that meant you might be crazy.
Right.
I see. Well, when you were a smaller child, did anyone ever say that maybe you were crazy? You ever remember anybody teasing you like that you might be crazy?
not that way. I remember once when I was little, when I went to school, and a kid came up and said something about plain Jane or stuff like that. I mean, they always teased me.
You still remember that child calling you plain Jane?
Mm-hmm.
You still remember it?
Mm-hmm.
You know what that means if you still remember something like that, something unpleasant? It means that you're still afraid of it, even though it happened many years ago.
Kind of true, I guess. I guess I'm not very pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Dad doesn't think I'm very pretty. I
Who do
guess
you-
I got a mirror I can see too.
You say you're not very pretty? When
Tall and giddy and funny looking.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, Jane, we can see one of your fears. We can see some of your fears now. These are psychological kinds of fears that you've had for these many years. And remember when you first came in, you had the feeling that your father was entirely to blame for your condition. Now, you still find yourself thinking about him all of the time?
Not all the time, no. I remember other things, too. I mean, like in high school, the fellas, when I'd go into a classroom, they'd look funny and sort of shrink away when I'd have to sit by them, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe Dad was right.
But you
Then
weren't.
I wasn't pretty or anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that your father was right, but we'll talk some more about that some other time, a little bit later. What about your mother? You told me the other day that you wanted to devote your entire life to taking care of her.
Oh, yes. Yes, I want to take care of Mama because she's so wonderful. She's always done everything for me. She
Do you feel you owe her something?
Well, yes, she took care of things for me, and if it hadn't been for me, and Ellen said she wouldn't have stayed with Daddy, and I have to make up to her somehow or the other. I mean, all the things that
You mean you
she's
have
done.
to take the responsibility for your parents' failure to work out the marriage?
Well, it isn't that. It isn't Mother's fault because she's been wonderful.
Who told you that it wasn't money?
Well, I couldn't see, and Ellen was telling me why Mother was sick and everything else because Daddy wasn't any good, and because
You got the whole idea from her?
no, I saw it too. I mean, I saw that Daddy couldn't even support us, so we had to move in with Aunt Ellen.
Why wasn't he able to support you? Didn't you want to work?
He says he does. He's working, but he says he's sick. Something about a heart.
Do you have a heart condition?
That's what he says.
Is that what the doctor said?
Yes.
Then he can't work.
Something about hypertension.
Hypertension.
Mm-hmm.
Then he can't work.
Well, he's working. He has a job, but it doesn't pay much, and he can't support us. And if it hadn't been for Aunt Ellen, I don't know what Mama would have done because she didn't have anywhere to go.
Well, now, James, do you think it's your father's fault that he has this physical illness?
No,
It couldn't be completely his fault, could it?
no.
Maybe there's some things to be said on your father's side, too. Possibly your aunt has been a little bit unfair.
Well, she hasn't had an easy time either. I mean, Uncle Ruth was...
Well, now, this
wasn't
is
very
one of the
nice.
things that we've got to go into more so that you understand how these people have influenced you in these different ways, because what you're reacting to is their attitudes, their opinions, and you try to be loyal to each one of them. And that's kind of hard to do, because there are 4 different ones there. That is very hard to do.
Dr. Joshua learned much about the patient's difficulties, thoughts, and feelings after a series of these interviews. And of course, the more knowledge he has, the better he is able to help the patient. Meanwhile, Miss Malloy, the social worker, had interviewed the parents and collected the social background on James. Armed with this information, Dr. Joshua and Miss Malloy called in the psychiatrist again for a consultation on James' case.
If you recall, Dr. Sands, this was a 24-year-old girl that you saw on the board the other day that had attempted suicide.
So it's Fraser girl.
Yes. And I have talked with her parents several times now, and it seems that her illness dates back many years. But the past 6 months, she has become very much more depressed and hasn't been able to eat and had a lot of trouble sleeping. In fact, she's so discouraged that she just doesn't want to live. She's been forcing herself to go to work. I believe she's been doing some stenographical work in a bakery. And she has the idea that her fellow employees think she's crazy. Now, the parents do not feel that she's out of contact with reality, but she has talked to herself several times that this has been going on for many years.
Incidentally, she has had 3 physical examinations, and they haven't found any physical ailments. And, of course, this has made her more worried. Jane's conflicts apparently started in early childhood. She was always shy, a shy youngster, and had a lot of crying spells. Her schoolmates teased her. Her mother was certainly very protective of her, in fact, overly so, and insisted on making most of Jane's decisions. She says in interviews that she just can't understand why children and the school teachers had taken this attitude toward her daughter. It appears that Jane didn't develop very well socially.
You feel that the mother's views of Jane's situation were unrealistic?
Yes. Yes, I do. Her father has been in very poor health. I believe he's had a diagnosis of hypertension resulting in a cardiac condition. And consequently, his employment has been very limited, and they've had a difficult time financially, and have had to move in with the mother's sister, this aunt.
And has the father's illness kept him at home?
Well, some of the time, I think he's had restricted employment. This aunt, by the way, has had many marital problems. She's dictatorial, prudish, and overprotective of both Jane and the mother.
But in a different way than the mother?
Yes, I would say in a different way. Jane's father insists that he loves his daughter, but he said many cruel things to her. In fact, one of his comments was, well, she was always so awkward, complaining about how the kids teased her, and she always had an ache and a pain, just like her mother. And he just thinks that she was too fearful or too scared to ever fight back. Another thing that I think that is pertinent is that she's been withdrawing from all contact lately. It almost appears, Dr. Sands, as if she's experienced lifelong frustrations. She certainly has made a poor social adjustment, and she wants to blame her father for all her problems. She's constantly recalled during the time that we've seen her in the hospital that people dislike her and that she knows because they avoid her. The parents, however, I feel, don't you, Dr. Joshua, that they're very pleased over the improvement that she's made?
Yes, they seem to be.
And she's, as I understand, she's able to eat and she's sleeping better. And believe it or not, she's laughed occasionally, which is a little unusual. She is concerned, however, about returning to her former job. And I advised the parents the other day that perhaps they might suggest to the employer that she wouldn't be back again. I don't know what you feel about that.
Well, in terms of her job, was she actually able to work efficiently as far as the task of the job itself is concerned?
She functioned on the job.
What was she in this?
She was a stenographer.
And she could handle that task all right. So that her real problem was in relationship to the people there rather than to the technical parts of her task.
That's right.
So apparently she has some resources and abilities of her own, in spite of this general attitude. You've done a lot of work with her, Dr. Joshua.
Yes, as you suggested when you saw her on rounds about 2 weeks ago, Doctor, I've seen her every day. I've given her a couple of psychological tests, and we'd like to hear about the test results.
Yes, I think that's very important.
Well, it shows that she has a personality structure which is undergoing a good deal of stress and strain. I didn't find any specific psychotic types of thinking or systematized reactions with extensive projective tests. She seems to have possibly some ego strength, although I think that the psychological test results are in agreement with the case history findings in respect to very poor social development.
But not too much distortion of reality.
That's correct. It seems, I would be inclined to say that the environment has been a very stressful thing, and that has produced the distortion rather than it being basically weak ego from childhood.
How does she relate to you in the sessions that you have with her?
Well, she's much different than when you saw her. She's not crying as much anymore, although she does have crying spells. They don't last as long as they did. she is eating and sleeping. The intern says that she's doing very well in respect to eating and sleeping, much improved, although occasionally we have to give her some sedation to help her go to sleep at this time. She's afraid, psychologically, she's afraid of people watching her, and she can't explain that, why she is afraid, and she's, of course, fearful of returning to work.
Will I be able to see her today?
Yes, we can have her in right away if you'd like to see her.
Would you send the patient in, please, Jane Fraser?
I might add that her mind doesn't dwell quite as much on her father.
She knows she's coming in today?
Yes, she's been prepared for this interview. Yes, she knows who you are.
Hello, Jane. Sit down, please. I hope you don't mind coming in and talking to us. Do you remember seeing me before?
No, I don't.
Well, I was on the ward the first day that you came in, and you were kind of upset then, weren't you?
I guess
You look a
so.
little different now.
Feel a little different, too.
What have you been doing since you've been in the hospital? What sort of things get busy with?
Well, I didn't do much of anything for a while, then I thought maybe I could help the nurses a little bit.
What have you been doing then?
Not much. I mean, giving back a little.
Well, that's very nice. Nice to help other people.
Kind of fun. I kind of like it. They like it, too.
What about treatment? Have you had any kind of treatment?
But Dr. Josh has been treating me. I mean,
Well, what about this treatment? What do you do there?
Well, it's kind of fun. I mean, I stop and he tells me what is going on when I talk. And
What kinds
really
of things do you talk about?
Oh, talk about when I was little, and talk about people and things that happened to me, and sometimes I talk about dreams, and I don't know, just anything.
Sometimes when you talk about things that happened a long time ago, is it always fun to talk about those things?
No, it isn't. It's kind of a relief sometimes, but it isn't fun.
It ever makes you kind of sick?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that means?
Means that it must have bothered me quite a bit then to make me sit still. And that maybe if I talk about it more, I just get it off my chest, it'll help.
Might help.
Uh-huh.
I think it will, too. I think these are things that ought to continue for a while, Jane. And by seeing Dr. Joshua, working these things out with him, I think you'll feel a lot different about a lot of things. Not just inside, but in the way you get along with people. Well, I don't want to keep you, Jane. Thanks for coming in, and I'm very glad you're feeling so much better. I think you'll feel even a lot better. Bye. Well, she certainly has changed.
Oh, we think she has.
It certainly points out that you don't want to jump to conclusions from the activity of a patient in the acute crisis that this patient cannot be helped. Here she was in a situation so depressed that she actually tried to destroy herself. And now we see that she's taking a much different attitude towards herself and towards the hospital and towards treatment.
Well, I must admit, I didn't think she'd make as much progress at first.
Well, you never know unless you try. Of course, that's the way it would go. And I think our psychological test has certainly borne out that we were justified in keeping her here at the hospital and attempting to work with her right away and not just giving up on her like that. There's some interesting things about this whole reaction. Here's a young girl who was apparently able to graduate from high school and to acquire certain skills, to get a job, and yet here we are with her in the hospital attempting to destroy herself, withdrawing, and she's obviously had these problems for a long time, but they came to an acute crisis sometime in the recent past. certainly I think from your relations with her, you ought to be able to help her to tie these things together. And as she gains confidence in facing her own feelings, she's going to be able, I'm quite confident, to change her opinion of herself. And when she can change her opinion of herself, then perhaps she can face the world. Because the thing that's happened with her is not that she has altered reality or distorted reality, but she has certainly gotten a terrible picture of her. Now, this came, of course, largely from the influence of all these people. This family of hers is going to need a lot of help. I think treatment, as a matter of fact, is going to evolve not only on what you do with her, but perhaps what you are able to do with this family. Will they come in?
Yes, they've been very cooperative in working with
There's those four people, each with four different sets of attitudes towards themselves, the world, and Jane. They've got to be helped with those things. And by working with the family and with her, I think we're going to be able to take care of her very nicely. She's got a good attitude. She may not be quite ready to leave the hospital yet, but I think she's on her way. And we're all set now. I think our program is pretty well defined for us.
Okay. Jane was fortunate. Her difficulty was discovered early, and she received adequate treatment without leaving her home community. The fact that a mental health clinic was available to Jane saved her from the necessity for commitment to a mental hospital. If such clinics were more generally available and their facilities more adequate, a great many more people like Jane could be helped before they become seriously disturbed. Now, since only a small percentage of the persons who need attention are psychotic or, in the legal sense, insane, proper attention to mental health can mean a happier life and prevent possible more serious hospitalization. Jane's future and the future of all persons who recover from mental disorders would be brighter if we could realize that under proper guidance, behavior patterns can be changed and a person need not be penalized for past actions. We need a positive attitude of acceptance and understanding so that the thousands of Janes and Johns and Marys who try to build a new life with a record of mental illness behind them can find the going a little easier.
The greatest sin toward our fellow creatures is not to hate them, but to be indifferent to them. That is the essence of inhumanity. The 11th Commandment, a public service presentation of WOI-TV, is produced by Ray Stewart and directed by Lamar Smith. Technical director is Ken Wilcox. This program was produced in cooperation with Broadlawn's General Hospital, Des Moines, Iowa.